Yeah, very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. If you've just joined us, you missed some great stuff from Paul Rice talking with Joe Malloy last night on the history of sport. They're not quite at modern day just yet, but they're getting there all the way up to the 20s at this point, and it's been a brilliant series all the way back to the 1600s. If you haven't actually subscribed to it yet, then do yourself a favour and get on to the OTB Podcast Network. And the best place to get the OTB Podcast Network is in our shiny new app, which is now in the App Store, available on Google Play. Or you've got an iPhone, Owen, do you? What do you call it? It's the App Store, is it? Is it something?
Oh, I'm Android as well, so I'm
okay.
Google Play all the way.
Yeah, well, the app is now available. Search OTB Sports app and download it and mess around with it because it's full of good stuff.
It really is. You definitely want to mess around with that brand new app, as you say. Available. Are you excited about this? Is this a big moment for you? Is this like your latest birth of a child, Ger?
I've got 3 children. I understand that it's a lifetime commitment that you make when you have a child. So I hope this is a bit easier than parenting. That's what I would say.
Well, you're not looking after the tech end of things. I don't think people are expecting that. So you basically get all the good things of being a parent of this app.
It's a shared thing, Owen. OTB is very proud of this. So this is the best place to listen to OTB AM. You can watch all of our videos. You can listen to our 40-odd, 50-odd podcasts. All that good written stuff that we're doing as well is all combined in one nice, tasty little package for you. And there'll be live scores whenever there are actually matches to talk about, which is coming very soon. Live sport is nearly upon us again, Owen. We should talk about this. We talked about it briefly a little bit earlier on, but for people who are coming through, I don't think everybody's quite prepared for the orgy of football that is coming our way.
I wouldn't describe it like that, to be quite honest with you. I think that would be kind of an overpowering sort of sense of football happening in front of you. People still have the choice to do this. Let's not forget to actually engage in what is going to happen on the screens in front of them. That engagement will lessen over the weeks, as tends to happen with every Premier. Like I think with every Premier League season, the first weekend is huge. The next couple of weekends are pretty big. Champions League kicks off. That's always very big, and then you get to run up to Christmas, and that really gives a new stretch of energy to it. But usually, come February or March, I would say that people tend to lose their interest in the league. But you could almost say that the coronavirus break came at the perfect time, because all of a sudden that time when people started to lose interest in the league was taken away from them, and all of a sudden it feels like a brand new season. So you have the excitement of a first day again. You've got a great early fixture in Arsenal against Manchester City to get things underway. And I think there genuinely will be a lot of people excited to have football that we care about again back on their screens. Like the Bundesliga, it's not something that we all care about unless people have connections to the country or connections to the team. That being said, a lot of people who support Premier League teams don't exactly have connections to the team. They just generally been growing up loving that particular team through their parents or whatever. But no, I think that's there's something correct what you're saying, that there's going to be a lot, but it's an optional thing. It's pay-per-view to a point. It's something that you don't have to actually engage with, and I think many people will probably get sick of it before it reaches its conclusion.
Yeah, well, there's going to be every single game is going to be on TV, and there's going to be a lot of different kickoff times. So we'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later on. In the meantime, Sheahan Hannon is with us at 8:05 this morning on OTB AM. So good morning, Shane. How are you?
Not too bad, lads. An orgy of sport is one way of putting it. I hadn't quite thought of it that way, but that gets the excitement going, I guess.
Whatever you're into, Shane. Any port in a storm. New rules, obviously, where everybody's allowed to be intimate again with one person.
Indeed. But the point Owen mentioned at the top of I kind of disregarded that in my head, that we'll be able to actually understand what the players are saying on the pitch. That adds an extra dimension of interest. You'll have the volume up full, I think, just to make sure you can hear what the players are saying, because there could be some quite interesting conversations. I've always wondered what they say anyway in the downtime, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, my favourite moment is going to be for when they're actually walking off the pitch with their hands over their mouth, and we can actually hear what they're saying anyway. It's like, yeah, I smashed you on Fortnite there last night, or whatever classy trash talk that tends to happen between Premier League players.
What have you got for Shane?
Yeah, a few decent bits going on this morning, lads. We'll kick off with soccer. Premier League teams will have the chance to play games in the next 2 weeks in order to tune up for the competition's restart. which of course is on June the 17th. The league will permit clubs to play friendlies against championship opposition under strictly controlled conditions. Social distancing restrictions and hygiene measures will be in place, and referees will not take charge of those games. Meanwhile, Bundesliga news this morning as well. Leipzig coach Julian Nagelsmann admits Liverpool target Timo Werner is likely to leave the club this summer. The German attacker has a €60 million release clause and has long been linked with the soon-to-be Premier League champions. Nagelsmann says he can do nothing more in his attempts to keep the player at the club. American sociologist Dr. Harry Edwards says Colin Kaepernick is the most significant athlete of his generation, as people across the world show their solidarity with George Floyd by taking a knee in opposition to the systemic racism that cost him his life. Sociologist Dr. Edwards spoke to Off the Ball last night about the influence of Kaepernick. The former NFL quarterback lost his livelihood for choosing to publicly protest the unlawful murder and mistreatment of black people by America's police force back in 2016. Some really interesting thoughts from Dr. Harry Edwards on last night's show. You can read about them in full on otbsports.com this morning, and indeed on the new OTB Sports app, as Ger mentioned. Manchester City will speak to Phil Foden about his responsibilities after the midfielder was filmed playing football with members of the public on a beach. The youngster was videoed and also photographed disregarding social distancing guidelines on Sunday. Foden was with his family on Formby Beach on Merseyside. A date in early November has been set for Russia's appeal against their 4-year sporting events ban at the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The suspension was handed down after the Russian anti-doping agency was found to be non-compliant by WADA last year. It blocks Russian athletes from competing under their own flag at the Olympic and Paralympic Games, and also bans Russia from hosting or bidding for major sporting events for a 4-year period. In rugby, David Humphreys says it felt the right time to step away after 6 years as Gloucester's director of rugby. The former Ireland out half believes it's best to clear the way for the Premiership club to have a clean start with their next head coach. Formula One boss Chase Carey has confirmed that a positive COVID-19 test by a driver would not result in a Grand Prix being postponed. He says if a driver were to contract the virus, then his team would have the option to use a reserve driver. The delayed Formula One campaign will get underway with back-to-back races in Austria next month in July. And finally for me this morning, lads, some racing news. Stradivarius and Anthony Van Dyke will clash in Friday's Coronation Cup at Newmarket. Along with Anthony Van Dyke, trainer Aidan O'Brien will also saddle Broome, while last year's winner Defoe is back to defend his crown for Roger Varian. Stradivarius is using the race as a warm-up for another tilt at the Gold Cup at Royal Ascot. Frankie Dettori won on his return to horse racing yesterday. Meanwhile, the legendary jockey rode Galsworthy to victory at Kempton.
All right, good stuff, Shane. Thanks very much for that. Shane bringing you up to date on everything that's going on. You get more of that good stuff over on the brand new OTB Sports app and on otbsports.com. Right, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
On otbsports.com this morning, Colin Kaepernick is the most significant athlete of his era. That's Dr. Harry Edwards. He's been on the show a couple of times now. First time I was around talking about O.J. Simpson, and he's actually in the O.J. documentary, one of the best contributors in that, and that's saying something because it was an amazing documentary series. And he actually worked with the 49ers as well for a period of time, so he'd know Kaepernick. And is unbelievably well qualified to speak about this, having been at the forefront of the civil rights movement all the way back to the 1960s. So a brilliant contribution on the show last night and talking about Kaepernick and how he just was really ahead of his time. And, you know, the continuing blackball of him and the end of his career, it will forever be a stain on the NFL. It'll take a generation to fumigate the White House after Donald Trump. That's more from Harry Edwards. I finally met a man who carried rubble from the Rising to Croke Park. That was the story that we were talking about a little bit earlier on in the show, and Paul Rouse, we replayed his interview from last night. Odi Nagalo wants to help Manchester United move higher and higher after extending stay. I am surprised that Odi Nagalo, if the stories were true about the 72 million contract that was awaiting him in China, so how much extra is he getting for the next 5 months to stay in England? And Cricket Ireland await nod from two governments to get ready for England. A one-day international against England is up in the air at the moment. That's otbsports.com.
The Irish Independent this morning leads with a photograph of Conor Bradley, the young Tyrone man who was first brought to the attention of Liverpool. Says that there was always signs that he had what it takes to make it to the very top. So come his 17th birthday on July the 9th, Bradley is set to sign a 3-year professional deal after a successful season on a scholarships contract at Anfield. The main story then here on the back of the Irish Independent is that United boss takes aim at restart relegation rebels. Ed Woodward not happy with with the fact that some people don't want relegation to be a part of the new Premier League restart, which is obviously a totally fair point. I mean, the exam has been cancelled, but the exam is back on. You have to sit the exam, relegation threatened clubs. Like, it would just be a farce beyond a farce if relegation were not to be a thing and Liverpool had the opportunity to actually lift the Premier League trophy. And Chelsea join Reds in race to land Germany striker Werner. Chelsea plotting a move to try and snatch RB Leipzig striker Timo Werner from under the noses of Liverpool. He's 24 years old now. He's going to cost £53 million at the moment. That is his current release clause. In a year's time, it'll be £36 million. So it could be a situation where they just wait for another year, but Werner is keen to go to Anfield ahead of Stamford Bridge, it is thought.
The Irish Times this morning has a picture of Drew Wiley. Wiley finds real meaning of team working on the front line. He's a radiographer at the Mater Hospital. Sorry, it's Ryan Wiley, who turned 26 the day the lockdown came in, and that's a picture of him there in action against Mayo last year in the Allianz Football League. And top 14 shelved, but clubs expect to complete Euro ties. So the French teams are expected to be able to compete in the remaining European rugby, which is great news for the Heineken Cup. But the top 14 has officially been finalised, and there's a Sean Moran column there as well. Reardon has a piece on the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, which they hope will be rescheduled between Navy and Notre Dame for 2022. There's obviously a fixture in place. It's Nebraska-Illinois for next year, but they're saying that it would be about 40,000 Americans coming to certainly the Navy-Notre Dame game, and it would have been a boost of about 80 million quid for the economy. So the tourism industry could really do with that.
The Irish Examiner this morning leads with this story from the FAI. FAI must reform to access state funding. Good detail in this from John Fallon this morning. Sheahan Ross really keen to have the full overhaul in terms of term limits and all the new initiatives that were to be implemented this year. He wants them in place by July. Of course, there's been some logistical problems with actually organising that. They need to have an AGM or an EGM, and they're looking at potential venues to get that done. It is July 26th is the date for that. You've obviously got a lockdown restriction being lifted less than a week before that, so potentially there could be a physical conference organised with social distancing, but it seems like a tricky situation for the FAI at the moment to try and implement a lot of what was agreed earlier in the year, the Memorandum of Understanding, before the middle of July. Of course, what could happen is if there's a new government formed and there is a new sports minister, there could be a situation there where they go a little bit easier on the FAI, but right now it is still Sheahan Ross's gig, and he is still very much pushing for reform, as the headline suggests there. Also here in the Irish Examiner, Igalo delighted to continue United Dream, as you've mentioned. There's something about how their faces glow out of it that makes it great. Meanwhile, this is Waterford and Mount Sion legends Larry Coleman and Frankie Walsh. They're pictured on the front of the Irish Examiner. Clubs meet to discuss RFU plans for return, meanwhile. And so who should return to play first, club or county, asks John Fogarty.
And look, it's obviously a big debate. I mean, things are moving very quickly. 3 weeks ago, you would have said that we weren't going to see anything before September, October. Now, all of a sudden, it looks like a lot of club teams are training in 3s and 4s around the country, and you would expect some kind of diktat that's going to be tolerated on pitches sooner rather than later. There's now talk that they're going to open the walkways around GAA pitches, and again, that very conservative calendar that was laid out a couple of months back, that's probably going to change, right?
You'd imagine so, pretty soon. And I don't think there's going to be anybody out blaming the GAA if they do actually come forward and change it. I think it's even hard to be totally angry with. I can see where people are coming from in terms of opening walkways and perhaps opening the pitches for a bit of socially distant action and all that sort of thing. But the GAA have clearly outlined their reasons, and while there is no prospect of social distancing being reduced, they don't feel comfortable in having their grounds open for games, and it seems not even for a puck around or a kick around. So they've clearly laid out their reasoning for it, in my opinion, and I think it's been fair enough. the thing is that everybody else is now looking at their businesses, for example, things that have cash flow issues, that they need to open their businesses early. The GAA don't suffer from the same thing. So perhaps we're judging the GAA by the wider societal thing, which is people are now in a hurry to get things back up and running. And I'm sure the GAA will probably go along with that pretty soon as well. That would be my hunch.
The London Times this morning has a picture of Jack Grealish on the back. He's in a two-page spread with Henry Winter, talking about his lockdown shame, how he wants to stay up for Dean Smith, and also Ron Smith, Dean Smith's father, passed away, and so they're like, we want to do it for him, and also about how he actually enjoys playing in front of the hatred of fans. Somebody obviously who has had a lot of it in his time and has dealt quite well with that part of it, better than he dealt with the lockdown, certainly early on. Rugby a step closer as Stars back training. Professional rugby was given the green light to return to training today, but some players may not be back in their clubs for 2 weeks, and the season is not expected to resume until the middle of August. So the middle of August seems to be a key kick-off point for all of rugby, and maybe the final quarter of the year is going to be a lot of top quality rugby and maybe some international rugby as well. There's stories about Australia wanting everybody to come there as well, and then Joe Root wants chants from the England Supporters Club. The Barmy Army played over the public address system when Test cricket returns behind closed doors in July. It sounds ridiculous and it sounds like it's a terrible idea, but then you think about it for more than a minute and you go, is it that bad an idea? Take some crowd noise. This entertainment that we're spending time with, let's make it as good as possible.
Yeah, like anything to make it better for people at home as well. Give the illusion that it's actually real. The Mirror this morning, afraid for their lives is the headline. Newcastle star DeAndre Yedlin reveals a shock message exposing family fears. This is DeAndre Yedlin, who was born in the United States, has revealed his family would fear for my life as a young black man if he lived in the USA, born in Seattle, so speaks with decent context. And Neda Manua is playing his trade in the United States at the moment with Real Salt Lake City. He is scared US cops could shoot him if he steps out of line. And they've both been on the record chatting about their fears with everything that's been happening in the United States over the last couple of days. A couple of other things here in the back of the Mirror. Frankie Jettori as fast in a mask. Gobsmacked stars warned to stop spitting. And oh no, Foden, City star breaks rules with beach kickabout. You can kind of feel everybody losing a bit of enthusiasm with these footballers breaking lockdown rules headlines.
Yes, you can.
I really do. I'm sorry, I do not care one bit about Phil Foden on the beach with his pals playing football at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe I should.
It's hard to muster the same level of or even outrage at this stage. Although, there are still some people who are still outraged by everything. So I say I salute the ability to continue to be outraged after months and months of continuous outrage. That is an amazing ability. Is it like is it like a shot in the arm that they take? Is there a particular aspect of their diet that allows anger to fester for so long? Yeah. What is your secret to being an angry person? Get in touch. I think it's a virus, isn't that it? Isn't the virus rage, according to the movie? And 28 days later, the virus was rage that killed everybody. 20 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM, the Irish Daily Star headlines for you. We'll party in style. Klopp title bash will be worth the wait. So that's Jurgen Klopp saying, it'll be grand and socially distanced for now, and then we'll have a proper one eventually. And Yedlin reveals fear. That's DeAndre Yedlin. That's the same story that you were talking about there. And FAI board united on package. The board of the FAI remained united last night behind the steps taken in January to secure the 35 million rescue package from the government, UEFA and Bank of Ireland. So that FAI story is rumbling along nicely in the background here. There doesn't seem to be any end in sight to... It's not like the new broom has come in, swept everything clean, and away we go. It's a unified board. There is rancour there, as there is in all of the Irish sports organisations at one stage or another.
Yeah, definitely. And that is the main story on the back of the Irish Daily Mail. It's not, sorry, on the back of the Irish Daily Mail. Sorry, back of the Irish Daily Mail is not just going with that. It's going with Premier League, £35 million a week. £35 million a week would not be a bad cash injection for the FAI. That is what top flight clubs must refund TV firms if there are further restart delays. So that is the bill if Project Restart does not actually get up and running and isn't as big a success as they're hoping it will be. Frankie a winner, and so's his wife. That's Frankie Dettori masked with a winner yesterday. Morton Missive kicks the FAI while it's down. That is their FAI story in the Irish Daily Mail. And Dyche angry with Burnley over contracts crisis.
The Irish Sun, their back page, is squaring up to racism. And FA are okay with players taking a stand during games. So this is Blackout Tuesday yesterday. Lewis Hamilton says he's overcome with rage at the brutal killing of George Floyd in the United States. And perfect fan Michael Fennelly has been humbled by support after quietly hanging up his boots last month. Only 35, the manager of Offaly obviously, and said he was very grateful for all the kind messages and comments he's been speaking yesterday. So the FA, FIFA, Gianni Infantino actually said that players should be applauded for taking a knee in FIFA football matches as opposed to being booked for it. So we'll see what happens when. I mean, obviously Jadon Sancho isn't going to be sanctioned, you would assume, for revealing a message on his shirt.
Like it's kind of mad we're having this conversation, isn't it? Yeah. Like I've got the Guardian up next, and Jonathan Liu's got a piece in it that the George Floyd death is too important to be hijacked by corporate sports insincerity. And it's not only insincerity that he's talking about here, but it is also about a double standard if you want to broaden the parameters to, say, NFL and their view on Colin Kaepernick to NFL publishing something in support of Black Lives Matter over the last couple of days, that there is a bit of a conflict there. And like just even on the main story here in the back of the Guardian, FA pledges common sense approach to racism protests. Jacob Steinberg here, like using language, obviously nothing to do with Steinberg here, but whoever wherever he's getting information in the FA, Steinberg is writing that it's unlikely that the FA is going to punish players who take a knee. Like according to this newspaper, it's not a definite that they're going to punish players, or that they're not going to punish players who take a knee or who protest. And like similarly the way you're talking there about Jadon Sancho, which is that the DFB are unlikely to take action against Jadon Sancho. Like, do we not want to actually have some sort of definite commitment to players here that if they do protest, then they will not be punished? Because it does feel like a little bit of lip service to say, great, we support the players and all that, but we won't actually support you if push comes to shove, and we actually need to qualify this as some sort of political statement that we can't stand over, because that is not supporting your players. Well, you can put up your Black Lives Matter social media post, but actually follow through and give these players a totally free pass.
Yeah, right. What happens when you have a player from a different country and culture who is protesting against sanctions for racism? So somebody in support of racist chanting, for example, or somebody who complains about their country's national team having to play behind closed doors because there were racist chanting. Like, at what point? I understand that this is a significant moment where everybody needs to get behind what's happening in terms of protest, and to properly tackle institutional racism, which exists everywhere, and we should be having that conversation. But if you give free rein to everybody to say what they want, then all of a sudden you start having white supremacy signs being flashed, and that's a protest. That's Maria free speech. For our radio listeners, I was doing inverted commas on that, just in case anybody thinks I actually think that's true. Like, what do you do in those circumstances? Does the players' union come out and say, well, you said this was okay, but why is this not okay? One is clearly racist, and they are completely different things, but you know that an equivalence will be drawn. It's completely false, but you just know that there will be fairly horrific viewpoints out there amongst the playing population in various leagues right across the world who might take this as an opportunity. If someone flashes a Nazi salute and says, well, I'm just protesting, like, then that's why those were introduced in the first place, essentially.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I don't see any issue with a football league coming to the fore and saying this is our stance on racism.
Fair enough. I agree.
That if you come out and say, and you're Jadon Sancho with a Black Lives Matter, Justice for George Floyd T-shirt, that is fine. If you come out saying I support the KKK, that is not fine. It's you can clearly make a very defined stance on something here, but also just obviously I'm being facetious there and being ridiculously OTT. But what if there was some under the surface racism that existed within certain leagues. And if that bubbled to the fore as a result of people being able to express themselves politically, at least that's out in the open then. Like, I mean, is it the inherent racism, the invisible racism that is almost more insidious than the racism that's actually at the top level because you can't see it and it is more institutionalized? Like, I don't know, again, there's a little bit of being OTT there as well, but I certainly would have no issue with a league saying we will support you in your Black Lives Matter protest of any description, of any sports league.
Yeah, look, I think they should actually be openly supporting it, but then it becomes corporatised, and that's, I guess, the whole point of Johnny Lee's piece today. 26 minutes past 8, I'll give you the Telegraph headline. Woodward takes aim at restart rebels. This is Manchester United Executive Vice Chairman Ed Woodward urged Premier League chief executives to accept that relegation was an inevitability for 3 clubs if the league was to fulfil its obligations as part of Project Restart. Premier League gives go-ahead stage friendlies, so they're going to happen, and Frankie Dettori back in a mask and back in the winner's enclosure. FA vows there will be no punishment for taking knee, so they are saying that there'll be no punishment for taking a knee. That's the Telegraph for you this morning.
The Irish News then, finally for me, jubilant Dettori slots back into the groove at Kempton, and McShane says best is yet to come from Slotneil. This is their hurling manager, Michael McShane, who says the best is yet to come from his team and that their eyes are firmly set on winning a historic All-Ireland club title.
We haven't been able to say this for a while, but the Racing Post, Frankie's back. A brilliant picture of Frankie Dettori on a black background. Lester Piggott rode until he was 59. F it, I'm going to give that a go. The riding superstar returned with a winner yesterday and is hungrier than ever. It's a 2-page spread with Frankie Dettori, and then their back page is a preview of the match between Werder Bremen and Eintracht Frankfurt tonight. So it feels like it's just a normal Wednesday for the Racing Post, and it's big and chunky, and it's good to see it actually back on newsstands, because when a lot of media organisations have stopped publishing or gone to fewer hours, a lot of them don't manage to actually come back. But the Racing Post, channeling their inner Michael Jordan, released their 2-word press release. We're back a little bit earlier on this week, and delighted to see that. So what are we at? 27 minutes past 8 this morning here. We are very excited to tell you about the OTB Sports app, which is now available to download in the App Store or the Google Play Store. If you're watching on OTB AM right now, if you listen to any of our podcasts, if you enjoy any of our videos on YouTube, or indeed if you tune into any of the shows, the OTB Sports app is going to be something you're going to really enjoy. It is a home for everything that we do here in OTB. Featured articles, sports news, live scores, over 40 podcasts per week, all of our videos and our 24/7 sports radio station. You can read, watch or listen in to everything from OTB in one single place. Just search for OTB Sports, download, and away you go. And remember to rate us, and if you've got any feedback for us, feedback@otbsports.com is the email address. Feedback@otbsports.com is the email address if you want to give us any thoughts on that. Now we're going to look back at the ESPN Lance Armstrong documentary next here on OTB AM. But first, let's hear a little bit from Dr. Harry Edwards. He joined Joe in last night's Off the Ball to talk about the George Floyd murder and why it has sparked so much unrest in the US. A reminder, the best place to listen to this piece is our podcast network over at otbsports.com and the OTB Sports app.